Hello, I'm David Little.
And I'm Jill Gittins. Welcome to our podcast number 2. I hope you enjoyed the last one. Now, we've been discussing homeopathic history and its vital principles, which we'll be continuing today. This episode is called The Vitalists versus Mechanists.
Before speaking to the threefold vision, it's important to understand the introduction to the organon. This is based on an understanding of the difference between the vitalist and mechanistic schools.
So, what are the vitalist schools? The vitalist school of medicine traces itself back to the great Greek physician Hippocrates, who lived in the 5th century BC. Hippocrates is the founder of Western medicine, vitalism, naturalism, minimalism, and moderation. He stated that most diseases were cured by similars. Now, since early times, the mechanist doctors have recited their maxim tolle causam, which is Latin for remove the cause. But Hippocrates made it clear that disease was based on an etiological constellation and not on a single cause. Now, David, can you tell us some more about Hippocrates and the Hippocratic Oath?
The Hippocratic Oath was given by the Hippocratic school of ancient Greece, and even modern doctors today take the Hippocratic Oath. The patrons of the healing arts in the Hippocratic Oath are Apollo, Asclepius, Hygeia, and Panacea. Apollo himself represents the light of self-inquiry. Asclepius means unceasingly gentle and denotes how the physician should always try to do no harm. Hygeia is the modern name Hygeia, and it stands for hygiene and other things like diet, exercise, regimen, and different personal habits. And Panacea represents the materia medica and the therapeutic arts. This was a separate school from the surgical school of the day, although Hippocrates refers to surgery and speaks of that school. Those that use the knife, he said, which is obviously the surgeons of the day.
So, David, do you feel that Hippocrates has had an influence on modern medicine?
Well, actually, when you really look at it, when I first got started, the allopathic school was pretty much Cartesian in the sense that they had split the mind and body. They had a reductionist mechanist view of disease. But the newer generations of medical students, which were 50% women, they weren't satisfied with this. You know, they'd go and see their professor and for heart disease, and they'd be 30 pounds overweight, smoking cigarettes and eating a hamburger and an order of fries, and telling them how they should use all these medicines. This wasn't good enough for the new generation. They thought, oh, come on, really? I mean, I go to the gym, I try to eat clean, I try to think about things, I try to maintain and manage my own stress. And this was a big change in the swing. So today, especially with more women in the profession, it's much more balanced than it used to be.
So, what about the mechanist school? Now, the mechanist school can be traced back to the Greco-Roman doctors Dioscorides and Galen. Dioscorides, who lived from 40 to 90 AD, he developed his system based on classifying diseases with pathological names like fever, constipation, indigestion, etc., and giving specific remedies classified such as diaphoretics, purgatives, emetics, etc. He was followed by Galen, who lived from 130 to 200 AD, who postulated that what he called the materia peccans, and that is Latin, it means diseased material. He stated that the diseased material is the proximate cause of disease and its elimination will cure the problem. He proposed the maxim, opposites cure opposites as Lord of Cure. And
in this sense, if there was heat, use cold. If there was cold, use heat. If there's spasm, use an antispasmodic. If there's inflammation, use an anti-inflammatory. This was a flawed attempt to imitate nature during the crises.
Now, the modern allopathic school is a merger of the old surgical school, along with Galen's views on materia medica. So what is this school good at?
Well, the modern school is really excellent at surgery and emergency, life support, and palliation when the vital force has no chance to respond. And Hahnemann actually mentioned this himself in the Organon. Do you know the footnote?
Yes, it's footnote 67, and it's about palliation during emergencies.
Okay, so he stated in this footnote that when the vital force has no time to respond to a crisis, palliation is often the first thing to do. This would calm the crises to the point where then you could give remedies, and in that sense. So long-term palliatory treatment, however, is not so effective because it doesn't actually suit the nature of chronic disease.
The Vitalists pointed out that diseases are dynamic in nature, and the disease material that you see is the byproduct of a mistuned vital force. It's not the proximate cause. So to sum up, if Hippocrates is the root of vitalism and similars, then Hahnemann is the flowering of modern vitalism, minimalism, and the homeopathic maxim, similars cure similars.
This is the essence of the introduction to the Organon. The following quote is from the Medicine of Experience, published in 1805, and the subject of this are the two maxims of experience.
And the real theme in this is the model of suppression versus the model of cure.
True.
So Hahnemann introduces it in this way, and this is very interesting. Two maxims of experience. But the unity of the life of our organs and their concurrence to one common end does not permit two effects produced by abnormal general irritation to exist side by side and simultaneously in the human body. So, David, can you explain what this means?
I hope so. The unity of life, I think we went over that a bit in podcast 1, the Wesen, the Lebenskraft, the essence, nature being the inner essence, and the vital force being its executive power. That, in a way, was introducing the idea of the unity of life. Here, Hahnemann speaks of the unity of life of our organs and that they work for one common aim. Basically, he's saying that the organism can't really focus on more than one thing at a time. It may be exposed to several things, but it has to deal with them one at a time, layer by layer by layer.
Yes, I noticed that he says they can't exist side by side and simultaneously. For example, in the mental sphere, you cannot have a conversation with more than one person talking at the same time. It leads to complete confusion. Neither can you listen to 2 or 3 pieces of music at the same time. It just makes a cacophony. And there is a unity in the life force that means that the body-mind continuum can only focus on one thing at a time, and the nature of that decides the way that the stronger and the weaker interact with each other.
Okay, yeah, that's really great, actually. I don't have anything else to say about that. So, Jill, can you read the first maxim of experience?
Well, the first maxim of experience deals with things that are different in nature. When two abnormal general irritations act simultaneously on the body, if the two be dissimilar, then the action of the one, the weaker irritation, will be suppressed and suspended for some time by the other, the stronger.
Oh, we need to unpack this a little bit. This brings up several things. We're talking about two dissimilar diseases or influences on the body, and how the action of the weaker will be suppressed and suspended. Now here Hahnemann uses the word suppressed and suspended. So what does that mean? So he's introducing the suppression syndrome here and how palliation works different than actual cure. And this idea of suppression, the suppression syndrome, is central to homeopathic pathology, really. And the key to that is understanding how dissimilar diseases act on the unitary function of the vital force. So,
for example, if you have a hot disease and you use a strong cold primary action of a medicine, that will cause a secondary heating action of the organism, which is an example of contrarius curentur.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which means that contraries, opposites cure opposites. And this is the basis of the allopathic medical school and involves palliation, drug tolerance, and suppression.
Palliation, drug tolerance, and suppression. 3 really important phenomena that you see, especially when patients come to you after being treated by other methods, other palliatory methods from the allopathic school, etc. So, an example of allopathic treatment. A patient with a fever and pain in his head is immediately given a medicine that has antipyretic properties and is analgesics, like paracetamol or something similar to that. What does this do? This suspends the symptoms as long as the duration of the drug lasts, and once it wears off, the fever and the headache will return. And this calls for more and more medicine, and this is the phenomenon of tolerance. They speak about tolerance of remedy. It takes bigger and larger doses at more frequent intervals in order to treat the symptoms, which they may take as the cause. So, this treatment suspends the symptoms for as long as the drug lasts, and when it wears off, they'll relapse. And this calls for more medicine as the tolerance builds up, and this suspends the disease. The first stage is suspension. When the original pain comes back, the headache comes, larger doses, more resistance, more frequent intervals. This suppresses the disease and transforms it into a deeper area. Now maybe they have pain and heat in the back or the kidneys or the liver or some internal organ. And this again will be treated by palliatory methods, which will suppress that expression of the diseases, and this runs the risk of the disease metastasizing into a more serious complaint like a heart disease. And then there's really a danger of passing away. This is called the Suppression Syndrome, and it's a retrograde movement from the law of cure. This is from without to within, from the more lesser important organs to the more important organs, deeper in depth. It's driving in the disease. The ancients used to speak about driving in the itch. So this is like driving in the headache. It's a simple headache, it's a simple fever, it probably would go away by itself. But then lots of suppressive drugs suspends it. It comes back, even in a new form. Then even more suppressive drugs are given, and now it's not suspended. It's not going to come back in the same form. It's going to metastasize into a new form. And the allopathic school, and even some naturopathic schools, and really even some homeopaths don't really realize this and how this works. So this is essential to understanding the direction of cure, Herring's law, Hahnemann's direction of cure, those whole ideas. So have I covered everything here on that subject?
Yes. So now we can move on to his second maxim, which deals with the effects of similars on each other, which is quite a different matter. Second maxim of experience. When two irritations greatly resemble each other, then the one, the weaker irritation, together with its effects, will be completely extinguished and annihilated by the analogous power of the other, the stronger.
So the stronger overcomes the weak. We don't often think of this, but the old homeopaths did. That the remedy is a mirror image of the natural disease. It's a medicinal, remedial disease, yes. And it's almost like a form of infection. And they used to use this idea in the early days. It's kind of fallen out of use now, but it has some important aspects to it that shouldn't be overlooked. So, a stronger similar disease removes a weaker similar disease. The stronger overcomes the weak. In the same way, a hot disease plus a stronger primary action of a hot medicine causes a secondary action that brings cooling and homeostasis. And this is the base of the word similia similibus curentur, homeopathic cure. If treatment by similars. Wonderful.
So if we take the same case that was treated by, say, paracetamol, somebody with fever and headache, and you give them treatment by similars, that's really quite different. Can you give us an example then of how you do that?
In homeopathy, the patient has fever and a headache, so we give a similar remedy that mirrors the individual inflammation, pain, and heat, with the key word on it being inflammation. The patient's head is hot and painful, their face is flushed, their eyes are glaring, their pupils are dilated, their carotids are throbbing. Now, there's very few homeopaths who wouldn't give belladonna immediately by those keynotes and characteristics. So the primary action of belladonna causes heat and inflammation. And the remedy disease overtunes the natural disease and actually replaces that sensation in the vital force. And this causes a secondary curative action of the unity of life. The primary action causes a cooling curative secondary action of the vital energy that returns the organism to the state of health. This is the correct direction of cure. This is from within to without. We'll deal with Herring's law, and I call it Hahnemann's direction of cure, and actually if you put Hahnemann and Herring and other great founders together, you find out there's 12 maxims they spoke about. And I explain all this in the Homeopathic Compendium, and when we do the classes, I'll go deeper into this stuff, and webinars. Gives me more time. But here I'm trying to just introduce in a podcast form some of the ideas that we'll go at much deeper when we delve into more structured classes, which I hope to do. We'll see how that goes. Ars longa, vitae brevis. Art takes a long time to learn, and life is short. That it is. This final segment is called Iatrogenic Diseases, which are physician-caused illnesses. The information is from Johns Hopkins Medicine's website, and the study was done at Johns Hopkins Hospital, which is one of the most prestigious allopathic institutes. And this is their statistics that they put together using their hospital as a basis. So, this information was actually published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, the AMA's own journal. So these aren't some conspiracy site website details about, some sort of plot. So what did they say? What did they find out? I have some notes here. It's a little detailed. Okay, so what their study showed is that medical errors, which we call iatrogenic diseases, are the third leading cause of death in the United States. At least 250,000 people per year. This first comes heart disease, then cancer, then medical errors, then respiratory disease, and then it goes on and on and on and on and on. But what is it saying? The third leading cause of death is treatment? Think about that. And think about what we just talked about the suppression syndrome, and add that to these statistics. You think they paid attention to a headache that became the nephritis, that became a heart disease, that became dead? No. So this is their statistics, what they see as allopathic doctors. But at least they're honest enough and transparent enough to put these details in the public domain. And normally you don't see things like this written down. They also express that birth certificates, death certificates don't really record the proper diagnosis of the cause of that death. So they're more likely than not to say it was the heart disease. They died from the heart disease. That was the problem. Not the headache that became the kidney disease, that became the heart disease, that became death. This is what they could see objectively from their point of view. Also, they put out in a different article some information about antibiotics, which are one of the most common drugs given. 20% of persons given antibiotics suffer from adverse drug reactions, ADRs. Most common are probably the anaphylactic shock. But they mentioned here some interesting things because they don't really talk about the anaphylactic shock. They talk about gastrointestinal disorders, kidney disease, and blood abnormalities. Caused by what? by antibiotics. That is the suppression syndrome. They are seeing it. They don't know they're seeing it, but they're seeing it. Out of this 20%, 24% of those people need prolonged hospitalization, 9% need further visits to the emergency room, 6% suffer from infections from multi-drug strains, 4% suffer from a serious infection by Clostridium difficile, which can lead to colon damage and death. And Johns Hopkins actually has a board, a stringent oversight committee that watches the use of antibiotics. They're very careful about it, and these are their numbers. So they say the true numbers must be much higher because of the routine use of antiviral or antibiotics for viral complaints, colds, flus, unknown fevers, to prevent possible infections. And they made it very clear that these are not some medicine that can just be given routinely on the chance that somebody might get something, only to really be used in emergencies because of the drug-resistant strains are spreading and multiplying, and some of them, they can't be treated with antibiotics anymore. So, even the CDC themselves said that antibiotics are one of the most prescribed drugs. They estimate at least 28% of antibiotic prescriptions are completely unnecessary. Antibiotics are the most common cause of life-threatening drug reactions and anaphylaxis, organic-specific and severe cutaneous adverse reactions. So, the suppression syndrome, suspension of the disease, drug tolerance. Take a look at it. Think about it. You're going to see these things. Hahnemann said one of the most common complex disorders where there are two diseases in layers is the allopathic drugs and the natural diseases which they suspend and suppress. So think about it. Now for closing remarks, I have something I wrote here. And I think I'll let Jill read this, and I might come in on it. Can you read that last?
My pleasure. All remedial systems have their inherent dangers. This includes allopathy, naturopathy, chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy.
I practice a number of these things. My first teacher was an osteopath and chiropractor and acupuncturist and a homeopath. So right from the start, I was broken in to see that all homeopathic healing wasn't done by little pills alone. But each one of these systems, they have cautions that you have to pay attention to. And there are mechanists in each one of these systems, and there's some vitalists in each one of these systems. So there are naturopaths that are mechanists. There are homeopaths that are mechanists. There are acupuncturists that are mechanists. What do I mean by this? Well, I'll just use the example of acupuncture, just to kind of work on a side angle here. There are those that use many needles, as many treatments as they can, and by very simple Western concepts of what they're treating. Okay? Naturopathy, same story. I met the old-time naturopaths with their herbs and their therapeutics and their hot sheet treatments. And they were quite different than many of the modern naturopaths who were more prone to give designer remedies and multiple herbal combinations, lots of vitamins, supplements, minerals. I mean, if you don't watch it, you'll leave with a suitcase full of medicine. Okay? Standardization, maximalism, radical intervention. That's the other school. There are homeopaths that do the same thing. They standardize their remedies. They don't use individuality. It's individuality versus standardization. Single remedies versus polypharmacy. Small doses versus large doses. High potencies versus many potencies. Some of these mixtures have several different potencies of the same remedy. Now, I'm not saying they don't have their successes here or there, but I am saying that you'll find if you look deeper, it's mostly palliation. See what they do well with and see what they do poor with. You'll find once again that maybe it'll calm a crisis, And if it's a self-limiting crisis, vital force will be able to recover and go into convalescence and come out and go back to normal. If it's a chronic disease and you use standardization, large doses, frequent remedies, it doesn't suit chronic disease. It doesn't suit the nature of chronic disease. So there's a mismatch right there. The homeopathy is like a mirror. You have to hold up the mirror and see what's in it, and see what's reflected. So maybe you can continue, Jill.
Well, the next thing is that every time you take a step away from the vitalist principles, the cardinal principles, then that increases the chances, basically, of making a mistake and causing adverse remedy reactions.
Homeopathy is a very safe and effective system when you follow the cardinal principles. And I guess I shouldn't repeat them all here. You've heard them many times, and you'll hear them many more times in these podcasts.
But to sum them up, we could say vitalism, the similar medicine, the single remedy, small doses and potentized remedies. And those are the basic principles you need to follow to practice homeopathy well. And in all cases, we have to remember at all times the first maxim of Hippocrates: healer, do no harm. Now that's a really great thought to end on. David, do you have anything to add?
Just about this idea of checks and balances. Did we go into that?
Yes.
We did.
Yes,
okay. Checks and balances. Like, if you follow the checks and balances that are there, individualization, similars cure similars, single remedy, minimal dose, etc., etc. If you follow those principles, then homeopathy is very safe. The more you ignore those principles, the more inherently dangerous it can become, or anything can become. Any type of healing art. I don't care what it is, really. So, do no harm? Oh, that's the unceasingly gentle Asclepius. Apollo? The oath? What's the oath? Know thyself. Know thyself. That's the first role, is know thyself. Then moderation. That's the Apollonian maxims. And of course the unceasingly gentle Asclepius, what does that say? Leave the surgery to the surgery school. Right? Gentle, harmless, careful, soft. The soft school. Like in martial arts, the soft school versus the hard schools. Tai Chi, Kung Fu, different. So, I just wanted to talk about this because it's something that's close to my heart. I spent a lot of years practicing homeopathy, and I want us to know what our remedies really are, how to use them in the most safe and effective manner possible. I've had to sort out a lot of cases over the years. And if we knew our basics, learned our basics well, everything will go good. There'll still be difficulties. Doesn't come easy. So that's about all I have to say on this subject. I think we've done our closing, and Jill is going to close off this podcast.
Well, I'd like to remember that last thought. Healer, do no harm. That's so important. Well, I hope you enjoyed the talk. Please remember to join us for our next podcast. And of course, I have to remind you to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you want more info about the Homeopathic Compendium, please visit friendsofhealth.com. The links are in the description. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave a comment. And that's it for now. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.